I'm 32 years old, and I thought I knew my parents. I thought I understood the way they operated, the way they controlled narratives, the way they made themselves look like saints while treating me like I was disposable. But nothing prepared me for what happened at my cousin Emma's engagement dinner. We were all gathered at this fancy restaurant downtown. My parents had insisted on hosting, of course, because they never missed an opportunity to show off. My mother wore her expensive pearls, and my father kept checking his Rolex like he had somewhere more important to be. I sat quietly at the end of the table, picking at my salmon, trying to be invisible like I'd learned to be over the years. Then Emma asked about family history. She was curious about genetics because she and her fiancé were talking about having kids. It was an innocent question. My aunt started talking about hereditary traits, and everyone was laughing and sharing stories about who had whose eyes or nose. That's when my mother decided to drop her bomb. Well, actually, she said with this bright, fake smile, Sarah isn't genetically related to any of us. She's adopted. She said it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather. The entire table went silent. I felt my face go hot. Not because I was adopted, that wasn't the issue, but because in 32 years, they had never told me. Not once.
What?
I managed to whisper. My father chuckled. Oh, we thought you knew. Didn't we tell you? He looked at my mother, who shrugged. We got you when you were 3 months old. Your birth mother was some teenager who couldn't keep you. The way he said it, like I was a rescue dog they'd picked up from a shelter. Like my entire existence was just a funny anecdote for dinner conversation. My hands were shaking under the table. Everyone was staring at me, waiting for my reaction. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked curious. My mother just kept smiling. You never told me, I said quietly. Well, it never seemed important, my mother said, waving her hand dismissively. You were ours. Why would it matter? Why would it matter? Those words echoed in my head. I excused myself and went to the bathroom. I locked myself in a stall and tried to breathe. My whole life felt like a lie. Not because I was adopted, but because they had hidden it from me and then revealed it like it was nothing in front of everyone, without any care for how I might feel. But then something clicked in my brain. This wasn't the first time they'd humiliated me. This was just the most public version of what they'd been doing my entire life. I pulled out my phone and started a voice recording. Then I went back to the table. For the rest of dinner, I asked questions. I kept my voice calm and interested. So, when exactly did you adopt me? I asked. Do you have any paperwork? I watched my parents exchange glances. My father cleared his throat. Well, it was all handled through a private agency. Very discreet. What was the agency called? I pressed gently. I don't remember off the top of my head, my mother said, suddenly looking uncomfortable. I smiled and let it go. But I kept recording. I recorded my mother telling everyone how they'd saved me from a terrible life. I recorded my father joking about how I should be grateful they took me in. I recorded every word. The next morning I started digging. I called the county records office. I requested my birth certificate. What I found made my blood run cold, but also filled me with a strange sense of clarity. There was no adoption. My birth certificate listed my parents, the same 2 people who had raised me, as my biological parents. There was no amended certificate, no adoption records, nothing. They had lied.
But why?
Before we continue, kindly subscribe and drop your name in the comments. We'll be giving shoutouts in our next video on Flex Revenge Unfold. I spent the next week investigating. I talked to my aunt privately, the one who had always been kind to me. At first, she was hesitant, but I told her what my parents had said. Her face went pale. Sarah, you're not adopted, she said quietly. I was there when your mother was pregnant. I was at the hospital when you were born. Then why would they say that? I asked. She looked down at her hands. Your parents have always been complicated. When you were born, you didn't look like what they expected. You had darker features. People made comments. Your father's family even questioned if you were really his. It caused a huge scandal. Eventually, your parents did a DNA test when you were a baby, and it proved you were theirs. But the damage was done. I think, I think they've resented you ever since. My heart broke and hardened at the same time. They had lied about me being adopted because they were embarrassed by how I looked. They had spent 32 years making me feel like I didn't belong because they couldn't handle their own insecurity and shame. But now I had ammunition. I had the recording from dinner. I had my birth certificate. I had my aunt willing to confirm the truth. And I had a plan. My parents were hosting their annual charity gala in 2 weeks. It was their biggest event of the year, where they invited all their wealthy friends and colleagues to donate money to various causes. They loved being seen as generous philanthropists. It was all about image. I told them I wanted to help organize it. They were surprised but pleased. Finally taking an interest in the family legacy, my father said approvingly. I smiled and nodded. I volunteered to create the video presentation that would play during dinner, showing all the good work they'd done over the years. They gave me complete access to everything. Photos, videos, testimonials. I spent days creating a beautiful presentation. But I also created a second version. The night of the gala, I arrived early. I looked perfect, hair styled, makeup flawless, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's rent. My parents beamed when they saw me. You look wonderful, darling, my mother said. It was the first compliment she'd given me in years. The event started smoothly. Cocktails, mingling, the usual fake conversations. Then, everyone sat down for dinner. My father stood up to give his speech about generosity and family values. I watched from my seat near the AV controls. When it was time for the video presentation, the lights dimmed. The screen lit up. For the first minute, it was exactly what everyone expected. Beautiful shots of my parents at charity events, smiling children, heartwarming music. Then the video changed. The recording from the restaurant started playing. Everyone heard my mother announce I was adopted. They heard my father's cruel joke about my birth mother. They heard the laughter. The room went completely silent. But I wasn't done. Next came the images. My birth certificate projected huge on the screen for everyone to see. My name, my birth date, and my parents' names listed as my biological mother and father. Then came my aunt's testimony, recorded with her permission, explaining the truth, that my parents had lied about my adoption because they were ashamed of how I looked as a baby. The screen went black. The lights came up. 200 of the wealthiest, most influential people in the city were staring at my parents. I stood up calmly and walked to the front of the room. I'm Sarah, I said into the microphone. And for 32 years, my parents have made me feel like I didn't belong in this family. Last month, they told everyone I was adopted to embarrass me and make themselves feel superior. But the truth is, they lied. They've spent my entire life punishing me for not looking the way they wanted me to look as a baby. They chose their image over their daughter. So I thought tonight at their image-focused event, everyone should know who they really are. My mother was crying. My father was red-faced and silent. People were already getting up to leave, muttering to each other. I saw several of them deleting contacts from their phones, my parents' contacts. I walked out of that ballroom with my head held high. My phone started buzzing immediately. Text messages from relatives, from family friends, from people I hadn't heard from in years. Most were supportive.
Some were shocked.
A few accused me of going too far. But here's the twist they didn't see coming. I had also sent the full video and documentation to the board of directors at my father's company and the trustees of my mother's charity foundation. By the next morning, my father had been asked to step down from his position. My mother's foundation launched an ethics investigation. Their perfect reputation, the one they'd built at my expense for 32 years, was destroyed in one night. 3 days later, my mother called. She was crying, begging me to help them fix this. How could you do this to us? She sobbed. We raised you. We gave you everything. I took a breath. You gave me everything except honesty and respect. You made me feel like I was never good enough. And when that wasn't enough, you lied about who I was to humiliate me in front of our entire family. I didn't destroy your reputation, Mom. I just stopped protecting it. I hung up. And for the first time in 32 years, I felt free.